Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ms. Krishna Desai, technical expert from Smarter City GIZ. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the online 14th Urban Mobility India Conference 2021. This session is on innovations in urban mobility, and the session is to be moderated by Dr. O.P. Agrawal, who has been the CEO for the WRI India since June 2017. He was the principal author of National Urban Transport Policy for the country, which was adopted in 2006 and has remained the key document guiding urban transport investments since then. The session will go on for 1.5 hours, and in which 6 panelists are to make their presentations. This first panelist is Mr. Pawan Molokotla. He is the Director, Electric Mobility Sustainable Cities, WRI India. He is responsible for overall strategy, creating and maintaining delivery of research projects, stakeholder engagement and partnership, work plan development, and fundraising. Shri Jaideep is currently holding the position of Officer on Special Duty, Urban Transport, and ex officio Joint Secretary, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. Shri Jaideep has rich experience in intercity and intracity rail-based transportation system and is handling various metro and urban transport projects in the country. Ms. Shreya Gadepalli, she is the Managing Trustee of Urban Works Institute, an Indian think and to-do tank that enriches the lives of people by helping cities develop green and inclusive mobility solutions and create safe and engaging public spaces. Mr. Thibault Belland, Project Manager, SETEC, ITS France. He has been involved in several electrification missions of bus fleets in different countries, including Canada, India, and Senegal. Mr. Sharat Chandar, Head of Policy for Uber India South Asia. He handles regulatory affairs and policy-related matters for Uber India. I request all the speakers to present their presentations within the time limit of 12 to 15 minutes, as it is a time-bound session. The moderator shall intimate the speakers 2 minutes prior to the closure time. The rapporteur for the session is Ms. Aishwarya Rai. Now, I would like to hand over the platform to Chairman Sir to conduct the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and welcome to my co-panelists. It's a delight to have all of you on this panel. Now, unfortunately, we were not able to meet before this session to sort of set an order together. But what we'll do is follow a fairly straightforward method. I'll make a few initial remarks in the beginning. I won't promise to take not more than 2 or 3 minutes. But then let's follow a certain sequence and then request all of you to, as mentioned earlier, not exceed your 12 to 15 minutes at best, so that we can come around for the second round or take some questions from the audience. So what I would like to do is start with Mr. Sharat Chandran to talk to us about Uber and the new mobility initiatives that are coming up. Then move on to Mr. Balan, who has been working on electric mobility in many parts of the world. And then move to my colleague Pawan, who has been working on electric mobility in India. Then I would like to move on to Shreya, who will give hopefully a very different dimension to the kind of innovations. And finally, for the last word, I'd like to move to Jaideep, who sitting in the ministry is really masterminding all these things. So what at the end is really the close that he would like to say. So that's the sequence we'll follow. But just as an opening sort of set of suggestions, I don't think transportation has seen the kind of transformation that is taking place today. I think the advent of technology getting embedded into transport systems, which had been locked into a certain technology for over 100 years, is now suddenly changing. So whether you have technology that has enabled shared mobility a lot more effectively, whether it is technology which has allowed electric vehicles to become the order of the day, whether it is technology that is making hydrogen possible right now, whether it is technology which is allowing integration between different modes of travel, including walking and cycling with other modes of travel, including shared vehicles, I think that is the big innovation that has taken place. COVID has added a new dimension to it. COVID has added a dimension of how far are we traveling? Are we traveling the way we traveled earlier? Is there likely to be a change in the way we travel, in our travel patterns? So I think a lot of change, real churning that is happening in the urban mobility space. So with this, let me sort of get back to all the panelists. I'll come in again at the end for some kind of a winding up. But can I move to you, Sharath? Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. O.P. Agarwal. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for this opportunity today. I shall immediately share my screen because I have a deck that I would like to present to begin with. So if you'll just give me a few seconds, I believe that you should now be able to see my screen. Is it good enough?
Yes, perfect.
All right. So within the overall theme of innovations in urban mobility, I'm going to talk a little bit about some ideas that could drive the future of mobility in India in the near term from the ride-sharing perspective. It seems that I will just pause the share for a minute because it seems that problem in the deck. I'll just resolve it. It will just take me a few seconds to get this sorted. What we'll do is we'll go in the normal way so that I can keep transitioning. So I shall come back again. And here we go. This should be better. So yeah, what I'm going to touch upon very briefly, and I hope that now my screen is visible. The next slide. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see the screen. It's still in the slide mode. It's not gone to that presentation mode.
Yeah, what I've done is I've kept it on this mode because I think
fair enough. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
All right. So within the, as I said, I'm going to touch very briefly on the central idea of rideshare. I shall talk about trends in mobility, and then just two few verticals where I feel the change is imminent: multimodality, so multimodal trips, and zero emissions. So to begin with, just talk about ride sharing because Uber is all about ride share at the end of the day. So a lot more than just a taxi. So when we look at ride share, one of the things that we can envision immediately is that we make the supply base flexible, which means you could be someone who owns a car, who logs on to a ride share app today to drive and earn, and maybe not do so tomorrow. Maybe you want to drive and earn again over the weekend, and so on. And so the supply base of vehicles becomes flexible. And you also have the capability via an app to match available supply and demand smartly and in real time. Another thing is that the price of the ride could be dynamic, and that incentivizes drivers, of course, for being on the road when the demand is high. Now, what are we trying to do here? So the Energy Policy Institute at the University of Chicago says that North India breathes pollution levels that are 10 times worse than those found anywhere else in the world. So one of the key goals that we have when we are doing optimizing ride sharing is that we want to reduce personal car use. So, and even as we address pollution, we also solve problems such as parking and first mile, last mile connectivity gaps. So, as we believe we are the world's largest mobility platform, so therefore at Uber, we believe we could shape the future of mobility. And we believe that this is going to be shared, as you said, zero emission, multimodal, and inclusive. And therefore, moving very quickly, I want to talk a little bit about multimodality, which I believe is extremely crucial for Indian megacities. And what we aim to do essentially is that your smartphone becomes the one-stop shop for all your mobility needs. So you can turn every journey of yours into either a mass transit or a metro bus journey or a rideshare journey or a micro mobility trip or any combination of these various modes. And how do we do that? So we have transit agencies, which are city level administrations, which work with ride-sharing organizations or ride-share apps. And what do they do? Essentially, we can do two things. One way is through journey planning. So, what happens here is that on the app, you can see the fastest routes, the cheapest routes, the real-time bus or metro schedules. You can see departure times for public transportation. You can get walking directions to and from stoppage stations. So in India, you can already actually do all of this in a few cities, such as Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, and Hyderabad. We're actually able to do this on the Uber app already. So you can plan your journey from start to end through a single app and sitting at home before you actually start. And the next level, of course, is to introduce mobile ticketing, whereby you can also pay using your smartphone for these multimodal trips through a single window. And this too is already available in some parts of the world. So what does a complete transit trip look like? So what you do is you have the journey planning. The Uber app gives you the journey planning feature. You plan a multimodal trip, which involves, say, a bit of walking, a bit of first mile connectivity, then maybe a metro, maybe a bus, and maybe the last mile connectivity, again, using an e-rickshaw, for instance. So you do all of this, you get the estimated time of arrival, which the journey planning feature gives you. You could perhaps in future be able to do ticketing and booking right there. So you get all the tickets and book the entire trip sitting at home. Then you start your journey on the first mile. As the trip is tracked in real time by the app, it gives riders the sense of confidence and safety. And then as you complete your first mile trip, you'll see on your screen the arrival times of the next metro or the next bus. So you're able to transition smoothly. And you therefore move on to the transit modes, such as metro, bus, so on and so forth, and thereby complete your journey. So end-to-end is seamless integration. And this, I believe, would be very crucial for Indian cities going forward. And therefore, when we talk of engaging the next billion riders in India, we talk of products that are transit-oriented, but also products that are solving first mile, last mile solutions, encouraging digitization, consuming less parking space, and accessible for everyday Indian users. So you have motorbikes, you have autos, you have smart e-bikes. You also have high capacity vehicles such as buses, minibuses, and so on. And finally, coming to the last part of my presentation, one of the things that we at Uber really think about every day, and I'm going to spend a few minutes here, is that we think of how to make our platform zero emission. And we actually have a target to do this globally by 2040, including in India, of course. So this is our stated goal. And we understand that this means millions of zero emission rides a day. And the path there will be electric, it will be shared, it will be with buses and trains and bicycles and scooters and various modes. And therefore, we are committing by 2025, for instance, a certain amount of spend to help drivers transition to EVs. And this is, of course, global. This is a global commitment. And then by 2030, in certain geographies, we aim to be 100% electric or in micromobility. And by 2040, the same target globally everywhere, including India. And that brings me to our big bet for the year. So a phrase which you will come across very frequently when you talk about electric vehicles anywhere in India is that we are about enabling the EV ecosystem. And this phrase is critical to understanding how we at Uber also approach electrification. And this is what we are doing very significantly when we seek partners both in government and outside government. And so what we have here is this year recently, in fact, it's ongoing now, we have the Uber Green Mobility Innovation Challenge, which actually is an electric vehicle startup initiative. And what we feel at the outset is that ride-sharing companies like us, we have the scale, we have the data, we have the technological know-how to accelerate electrification of mobility. What this event will do will help us achieve 4 things. And this is actually going on in real time. We have targets to complete this within the next 3-4 months. It's an ongoing exercise. And what we're trying to do here through engagement with startups in India, in the mobility space, in the EV space, is actually to do 4 things. The first is we want to establish ourselves as one of the key drivers of electric mobility, set the tone for what we can do as a platform and as a rideshare company to help accelerate that trend. The second is to leverage our strengths, as I said, as a platform and a tech leader, and to mentor and drive value beyond pure dollars. We, of course, have dollar commitments as well, but beyond that, we want to drive value through mentorship. We know we have immense talent, we have leadership, who know the global mobility markets virtually like no one else, and we know how to scale quickly. And therefore, with these insights, with these mentorship, with this support, we believe that we can help startups unlock their potential, which will be a win-win for us and will also enable the EV ecosystem in an accelerated manner. And therefore, the third thing, we want to broaden our knowledge, make more strategic partners, especially in key segments like E2-wheelers, E3-wheelers, and through the process of mentorship, look for compatibility, which will even give us new partners, new strategic partners, new products that even we ourselves might not know about yet. And finally, create a meaningful impact on sustainability. And we're sure that our impact will go far beyond the Uber platform. And these startups, which are participating in the Uber Green Mobility Innovation Challenge today, might just hold the key to electrifying mobility in India. So that's all I have to say for the beginning. And of course, we shall take the discussion forward as we go ahead. But for now, I shall hand this back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very, very enlightening. I mean, Uber has been a classic example of how technology has got embraced to give us a convenience that we were all looking for. It's a kind of convenience which, to my mind, has transformed a lot of things. And it's not now just with, cars, but the whole app-based systems moving into buses, moving into so many other things, moving into integrated systems. I think that is where the world is headed towards. So I think the game has just begun. The opportunities are many, many more. And let's hope that really makes the personal motor vehicle unnecessary going forward. I think that's primarily your objective. So thanks very much for that. Let me now move on to Mr. Bella. You've done a lot of work on electric mobility. What have you been doing across the world? And then I'll get to my colleague Pawan to tell us what's happening in India. Over to you. Mr. Bala? Whose slide is this?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Okay.
Thank you for giving us this time, and thank you everyone for attending this meeting. First, let me introduce myself first. I'm Thibaut Ballin, a project engineer specialized in bus electrification for CETEC IDS. I perform and follow bus.
I think you've already been introduced. The moderator, you've already been introduced. You can go straight into it.
Okay.
You have about 10 or 12 minutes, so I think let's not
Yes.
time.
Well, actually, our intervention today is the result of a study performed for Nagpur Bus Network, funded by the AFD, the French Development Agency, as part of the Mobilize Your City initiative. So we, CETEC, and our partner Nodalis performed a pre-feasibility study of bus electrification in Nagpur. And today I'm representing the whole team you can see on the screen. Let's quickly get to the point. What electrification of bus fleets implies in terms of strategy and impacts. Well, the electrification of urban buses, and in particular, the ease of converting from diesel to e-buses depend on operational characteristics, such as the topography of bus routes, the urban density, which has a direct impact on the commercial speed, but also the length of the routes and the depot location. It's also closely related to the recharge strategy of the fleets. For instance, upcharging implies very different choices on the rolling stock or the recharging infrastructure, but also different operational strategies compared to depot charging. Furthermore, e-buses operation implies a quite different articulation of costs. While investment costs represent a moderate share of the total cost of ownership for diesel buses, they are the largest part for e-buses. And on the contrary, depending on local electricity tariffs, operational expenses of e-buses save more or less money compared to diesel. Finally, the most dimensioning factor is probably the battery capacity, which determines the autonomy of the bus. So the choice of this parameter is closely related to the others I just presented before. but we'll see this in more details later in the presentation. Nonetheless, with the technological innovation in charging devices or in battery technology, or even regarding smart charging algorithm in particular, combined with the scaling up of production, the market is evolving quickly. Prices decrease while autonomy increases. And as a consulting firm, we closely monitor the market and include innovation in our all those innovation in our studies. For pre-feasibility studies, our role is to clearly identify and quantify issues and opportunities in order to propose an optimized e-bus ecosystem that minimizes costs, impacts on operation, while maximizing environmental benefits. To do this, in CETEC, we have developed an innovative approach that we transpose and adapt to each project anywhere in the world, in Africa, in North America, in France, and obviously in India with Nagpur. And our studies are based on 4 major steps, during which we use our own numerical simulation tools named VoltaBus. First, to anchor our results in the local context of the study, we calculate the energy consumption of vehicles on different routes to assess the traction power consumption and determine auxiliaries power. To do this, we implemented a mechanical and a thermal model in our software VoltaBus. Then, depending on the mileage consumption calculated, service schedules sometimes need to be adapted. Indeed, depending on the size of batteries, the bus services length, and the charging strategies, energy required for some tours can exceed battery capacity. In that case, services need to be divided so that they can be compatible with the buses. And then we calculate the minimum number of buses and the charging planning required to perform the schedule. It helps us finally to estimate power and energy required in the depot. And in parallel, we also can include our smart charging algorithm to optimize electrical infrastructure and power demand. To be a little more concrete, let's take a quick look at some of the outputs of our software. You can see on the left graph the energy consumption of a bus on one route, depending on slope, speed, ridership, but also the contribution of auxiliaries such as low voltage ones or HVAC or air conditioning. And on the right, you can visualize a typical charging planning and the associated power delivered by the depot during a day. To illustrate these steps, we propose to focus on the case study of Nagpur. We did this last year and we ended this year. In Nagpur, we performed energy consumption simulation for 45 bus routes. One of the elements we wanted to illustrate in the study is the significant impact of air conditioning on the energy consumption. As you can see in this slide, the average mileage consumption varies from 0.9 kilowatt-hour per kilometer without air conditioning to up to 1.7 kilowatt-hour per kilometer in the worst case. That's an increase of more than 75%. And we also notice a great heterogeneity between the routes, as auxiliaries consumption is almost proportional to commercial speeds, which varies a lot in our panel. Then air conditioning significantly reduces the range of e-buses for a given battery capacity. In the study, it was agreed that air conditioning was not essential. So regarding schedule adaptation, we can easily understand that increasing battery capacity decreases impact on operation. But this is not without consequences on the cost, especially because some vehicles do not need so much energy. And in the first place, regarding Nagpur's schedule, we recommended 400 kilowatt-hour batteries But our simulations showed that reducing it to 350 kilowatt hour has small impacts. And on the contrary, the impacts were significant if it was further reduced. Thus, we came to the conclusion that 350 kilowatts hour batteries seem to be a good compromise, as it only increases the number of buses required by 2% compared to 400 kilowatt hour batteries, while it decreases the total onboard energy by 10%, resulting obviously in investment savings. And moreover, the increase in deadhead trips due to the split of some services was almost null. In the same time, we determined the minimum number of buses required to operate the service schedule. Our software calculated the power required during the day of operation to perform all the services. Smart charging feature of the software shows that a reduction for 25 to 45% in maximum power could be achieved only by reorganizing charging activities. And we also noticed in the case of Nagpur that reducing the battery capacity does not have a significant impact on power delivered by the depot. Just at an early stage of the study, we were already able to determine that the use of 350 kilowatt hour batteries were very suitable for a Nagpur network. And as I already mentioned it before, optimized batteries could reduce both investment costs, but also environmental impacts. And environmental aspects will be the last topic of my presentation. Greenhouse gases emission, as well as air pollutants mitigation, are major issues. In 2 days, the COP26 will open in Glasgow, and electric buses can contribute to reduce the environmental impact of transportation. Greenhouse gases emission mitigation from e-buses compared to CNG or diesel buses depends on battery and frame production, which includes raw material extraction, refining, and manufacturing, but also grid emission factor, which depends on the share of coal, gas, nuclear power, or renewable in the electricity mix. What we noticed in Nagpur where the electricity still has a high emission factor, e-buses would save up to 40% of diesel buses' total emission. But decarbonizing electricity could help cutting emission by up to 85% over the life cycle of the bus. Regarding local air pollutants, nitrogen oxide, black carbon, particulate matter, etc., e-buses also annihilate emissions due to fuel combustion of buses. Thus, e-buses are also a good answer to health issues related to transportation. However, taking care of batteries at the end of their life is one of the biggest challenges that EVs industry is going to face in the next year. In a few years, a huge number of batteries will arrive at the end of their lives and will have to be treated. Because the issue of waste has long been put aside, anticipation is key. The good news is that batteries at the end of their life can already go through several circuits. As batteries are considered by convention obsolete when their state of health falls below 80% for mobility application, the first strategy regarding end of life is reallocating buses with aging batteries to low energy services. Actually, among all the buses services, there is often a heterogeneity in mileage intensity. Well, the less demanding services can eventually be performed by these vehicles. Then, when the state of health is too low for mobility applications, batteries can be refurbished and reused for stationary use to integrate renewable sources in the electric mix, for instance. But as a final step, since batteries are essentially composed of metals, most of them can be recovered through recycling. So if batteries end of life is one of the biggest challenges related to e-buses, this is also a great opportunity at several scales. First, as there are social issues related to raw materials extraction, such as child labor in illegal mines in Congo, for instance, or conflict with indigenous people or health concern also due to the use of chemicals products, recycling is a way to reduce the need of primary raw materials. Regarding economic stakes, having its own recycling industry can both help securing part of the material supply, but also create jobs or value batteries at the end of their lives. Finally, limiting the extraction of raw materials mitigates the damages caused on the environment, such as water and land use, ecotoxicity, etc. And extending battery life through second life application also reduces the carbon footprint of each application, while it can also help increasing the share of renewable power in the electricity mix. So industrial sectors still need to be organized to recycle all the batteries, but the recycling technologies already exist and have largely passed the stage of experimentation. It's over for me. Thanks for the attention. We remain obviously available for questions if you have any at the end of this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Balan. Very fascinating presentation. I think electric vehicles and electric buses more so is going to be critical in India going forward. So this is a very interesting area. I like the analysis that you've done about different battery sizes and what kind of impacts they have. Plus, of course, at the end, you spoke about the end of life. I think that is a very big concern that we haven't paid enough attention to, because we're all looking at how do electric vehicles get into the space, but that is going to become a very interesting issue going forward. So I'm glad you sort of brought it up. Unfortunately, Mahua Acharya has not been able to join us. Otherwise, she would have given you a much bigger perspective of what she sees as happening across the country. But let me now turn to my colleague, Pawan. Sir, Pawan can maybe also speak a little bit on...
Sir, I want to chip in. Sir, Jaideep here.
Yeah, Jaideep.
Sir, Secretary is calling. His press brief is going to happen anytime now. So if I can start my presentation.
Okay. Pawan, is that okay with you? Okay, Jaideep, over to you.
Is it visible?
Yes, visible.
Sir, my presentation is basically on metro system, which we are implementing in our cities. Our metro system, which we have so far implemented in 18 cities, is basically a conventional metro kind of system, where PHPDT requirement is very, very high, maybe beyond 15,000 or say 40,000, 45,000 plus PHPDT, peak hour, peak direction traffic. We have seen that with the implementation of metro project, the basic thing which comes to any city, apart from getting a metro system which is reliable, safe, and providing safety and security to the commuter, it also brings out many new things. That is last mile connectivity, first mile connectivity, many IPT system, which comes with the station, and this is the requirement of metro system. And with the success of metro in India, many cities are demanding that metro should be provided in their city, but they don't meet the metro parameter, which requires a very, very high PHPDT, as the metro project is very, very costly. If it is an elevated section, it will cost something beyond between 300 crore to 350 crore per kilometer. If it is an underground section, it will cost 500 crore. In some of the cases, like basically coastal town, it may go to 700 crore or 800 crore per kilometer. It is very, very costly system, and we cannot have this kind of system in every city. We were getting this demands from different states. Then a possible solution has been thought of that if we can have a light metro kind of system for a smaller city and we can cut down on capital cost, it will not only increase our financial viability, it will also decrease the burden on metro company as well as state government which is posing this project. My presentation is basically on the two new systems, Metro Lite and Metro Neo, and I will quickly touch upon these two systems. Sir, first of all, I will go through with Metro Lite system. Metro Lite system, this standards we have issued in July 2019 by Ministry, and this system is basically a tramway kind of system running on a dedicated right of way. It can be elevated as well as at grade section. Then it is for peak hour, peak direction traffic of up to 15,000. Metro system, they have very, very high passenger density, maybe AW4 passenger loading criteria they are designed, and it can cater up to 45,000 or 70,000 PHPDT. Bus transit system, whatever we have, we can carry up to 5,000 PHPDT. Heavy metro, as I mentioned, 15,000. So we have issued standard. Features, what are the features? It runs on dedicated right of way. Then it has got, in metro system, every coach is about 22 meters of length. Train length is minimum is 4 car, that is 30 for 88 meter length car. But in this case, the train length will be 33 meters because we will be carrying minimum number of people, 15,000 up to 15,000 PHPDT. That is why this train length has been kept 33 meters. It can increase up to 45 meters depending upon the location of the city. Then it can cater up to 15,000 peak hour, peak direction traffic. It will be air conditioned. It will have same punctuality, reliability, same kind of system as of metro system. Then cost reduction, its cost, which we have so far calculated through various DPR, it will be costing 40% of the cost of the conventional metro system. Then cost reduction, how it is reduced, that I will be discussing in my subsequent slides. This is right of way, this is broad specifications. Platforms are very, very simple. Platform width is, we have kept lesser, it is 1.12 meter. Then this rolling stock is low floor. With low floor, this construction of platform cost reduces. Then axle load of this car is 12 ton as compared to conventional metro train, the metro train, which is 17 ton, and PHPDT up to 15,000. Then whole train can carry 300 passengers, whereas in metro coaches, one coach carries around 350 passengers. So there is a much of difference between Metro Lite and metro conventional metro. And its maximum operating speed is 60 kmph against 80 kmph of conventional metro system. Then it works on 750 volt DC traction, unlike conventional metro system, which also works on 25 kV. They also work on 750 volt DC, but in this case, we have kept 750 volt DC traction system to reduce the coach weight because in 25 kV, we have to put transformer and converters in the coach. Then signaling is very, very simplified. It is grade of automation is 1 in metro system. It is grade of automation is 3 or 4. Signaling becomes very, very costly there. Then how, this is the table, how this cost of the Metro Lite is lesser as compared to conventional metro system. Viaduct, because of smaller, this is lesser axle load, this viaduct cost reduces, foundation cost reduces, pillar size reduces, viaduct width reduces. Then the stations are very, very simple. Then because of low power, that traction and power supply requirement reduces. Rolling stock is smaller, signaling is simpler. Then depot, we require less area as compared to conventional metro system. Now I will quickly come to Metro Neo system. This is a tired based system. It is similar to trolley bus system with a guided system, whether it is a curved rail, can be kind of guiding system or central guiding system. It can be employed in cities having lesser ridership. It is in the range, it is less than 15,000, or we can say that it is between 8,000 PHPDT up to 8,000 PHPDT. This system can handle. Again, similar kind of a slide. And it is also having dedicated right of way. It is a tired metro system. Length of the coaches can be 18 meter or 24 meter. It is an articulated bus kind of system, trolley bus kind of system, as you can see in the figure. And it can run on battery up to 20 kilometers. This, because of drawing power from the traction system, this battery capacity reduces considerably. As mentioned in the previous presentation, this battery capacity, they are putting 300 kilowatt hour, and such a high rating battery, maintenance of the battery is a big challenge in such a large battery bank. Then safety and comfort, it is at par with conventional metro system. Then depot can be away from your main corridor, because this is a trolley bus kind of system. It can go on battery power to depot. Then in that case, we need not to look for land of the depot near the corridor. Wherever we can get a cheaper land, we can go for that kind of depot. Then in this case, no FC, no platform screen door, and signaling is only this is having anti-collision feature. It is much simpler than even metro light system. And it has got a dedicated right of way of 8 meter. Platform width we have kept same or as of metro light system, 1.12 meter. And this axle load, if you see that it is only 10 ton axle load, against 17 ton axle load of conventional metro system and 12 ton of the metro light system. Then it can cater up to PHPDT up to 8,000. We can extend up to PHPDT of 10,000, but right now we have kept up to 8,000. As we gain experience, then we will see that how can we increase up to PHPDT up to 10,000. Then for 24 meter coach, 250 passenger can be carried, and for 18 meter, 200 passenger can be carried in AW3. AW3 rating means 6 passenger per square meter. Then it works on 750 volt DC traction system, overhead system. Then wherever OHE is not there, it runs on battery backup. Then signaling is simpler. It is ATP signaling. Then in this case, the cost of civil construction cost also reduces considerably as compared to conventional metro system or metro light system, because of lesser weight of the coach with the passenger. And then in stations, concourse are eliminated. There is no track. Then because of tired system, we get a better braking effort. That is why we are going for a ATP kind of signaling. Then less depot area, smaller station, and no FC. And its cost is around 25% of the cost of the conventional metro system. And this is the comparison of Metro Light and Metro Neo that I have already discussed. And presently we are planning this system, Metro Light system, Rithala, Narela. It is in the advanced stage. Gorakhpur, it is under examination. Jammu and Srinagar, they have also posed for Metro Light. Metro Neo, we have received proposal from Nasik. Warangal, we have received DPR, but it is not approved by state government. So is the case of Dehradun. This is all, sir. That's all from my side. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Jaideep. Thank you very much. I was hoping you would come in at the end to be able to give a summary, but I can understand the pressures on you.
Sir, if anything is there I can answer, then I have to leave.
No. I think this is fine. You know, there will be many will have questions on the numbers that you put out. I think a question that many would have is also that what is the difference between a Metro Neo and a bus-based system? But I think that is a question that we should have at other forums. But those are things that you may want to think of.
I would like to answer those questions.
Sorry?
I would like to answer those questions.
You want to answer that quickly, otherwise we'll move on. Go ahead.
Actually, sir, it is different than a bus system, electric bus system. In that way, in the electric bus, you need a high capacity battery bank. In this case, because you need only for 20 kilometers, you need to have a battery system. Battery bank capacity reduces, and it reduces the tear weight of the system. So basically, it is a greener transport system.
You have a overhead system for getting most of your electricity needs as against the battery on the vehicle.
And the other challenges will be in the battery operated buses. With new battery, you can run your services for longer duration. But if battery life is say 2 years or 3 years, you require more number of charging. So you have to take out your bus for charging, then you have to put. But again, there is a free system.
Let's not continue with this, because this discussion alone can be a 5-hour discussion. So I think let's look at another forum for this. Let's go ahead. The whole idea was on innovations. So this is an innovation. I would say, BRT was an innovation that Latin America or Brazil came up with. This is an innovation that India has come up with, looking at its context or whatever it is. Whenever you have innovations, there are questions. The questions will be there. Some good questions, some not the best questions, but it needs a debate at a much wider level. And let's not spend the limited time that we have here today. So thank you very much, Jaideep. I think let me not hold you back.
With your permission, I can leave, sir.
Sorry?
With your permission, can I leave?
Yeah, please. Yeah. I can understand the pressure on you. You've been organizing this whole thing. So do feel free to go.
Thank you.
Let me move to Pawan. Pawan, you've heard Mr. Balan talking about Nagpur. You've heard Jaideep talking about electric buses of a different type. I would call them electric buses. They're calling it Metro Neo, but let's call it Metro Neo. But they are in many ways tire-based vehicles using overhead power instead of battery on the vehicle. But let me move on to you. You can tell us what you've been doing. What are the innovations you've been looking at? Over to you, Pawan.
Thank you, OP sir. Is my volume okay?
Perfect.
Yeah. I'm going to walk through what's been happening in electric mobility space. Just let me hit the full screen. Thank you. Yeah. There have been quite interesting developments. I just wanted to give a quick snapshot of what's been happening specifically in the startup space so far in India. And just to set the context, I think we all know this, India's energy demand, very fossil fuel intensive, dependent on oil and coal. And I think this is the message: transport sector extremely dependent upon oil, almost 95% based upon the consumption patterns and rising fuel prices. NDC commitments, we are almost there with our close to 30% reductions in terms of the CO2, 33 to 35% by 2030. And the need for clean mobility transition, I think, is very well known. So I'm not going to iterate that. But, I just wanted to see what's been happening with the EVs so far. We have seen that the demand, has been picking up, not the way we anticipated, but, COVID factors. But, recently I heard this is the overall demand of Pan India, what's happening in India in terms of the sales of EVs. But in Delhi, in the last 3 months, the new EV sales vehicles have become almost 6%. So I think we are seeing a huge shift. It was 1.5% earlier in Delhi, but just last 3 months stats shows that the new purchase EV penetration rate is at 6%. So that's a good sign or a trend that, EV vehicles are coming up drastically in India. I think FAME spoken a lot in terms of, the number of models, the target vehicles and the outlay itself, 10,000 crores. And we also are very familiar with so many interventions. Just one or two I wanted to highlight: that the ACC Manufacturing Advanced Cell Chemistry PLI scheme that was launched just last month. And then, of course, several states, more than 15 states now releasing the EV policy clearly shows the trend, shift in the direction in terms of electric mobility. What is also interesting is that the state policies, several states have come up and focusing on jobs, on investments, and on targets in terms of what they really want to move ahead with the number of vehicles that they want to electrify. So different states have adopted different mechanisms. This is a snapshot which is available in WRI's state policy review publication. Some highlights, I would say this is not really an innovation, but a little bit more pragmatic thinking in terms of, what Kerala is talking about 50% exemption. Telangana is using empowerment tender for supply of EVs. Maharashtra recently announced, Mumbai specifically, that they are moving ahead with 1900 electric buses. And in Tamil Nadu, we see Ola setting up a Hosur plant and, talks about Tesla setting up manufacturing plant in Karnataka. And several government agencies involved, MORTH, Mahua, MOP, in the interventions for EVs. But let me show you this figure, which I thought was quite interesting. We all know that automotive sector contributes to 7% of the country's GDP. And you can see that, these are all the electric mobility OEMs that have really come up. And we see a huge build up happening in the NCR region, in Gujarat, in Maharashtra, in Bangalore, Hosur corridor, Chennai, and Coimbatore. So I think big development in the last 4 or 5 years. And this is also being led by a lot of these startups itself, several states also proposing subsidies, investments, and R&Ds. This is a very interesting thing that's been happening, that several of the oil refineries and retail companies have started looking at charging solutions, lead acid battery manufacturers going into, again, fleet charging solutions, power and renewable companies moving into lithium refining, batteries and charging, and electric equipment and manufacturers getting into e-two-wheeler manufacturing. So for me, this is clearly, I would say definitely how the industry is innovating when they're trying to move to electric mobility. This is the startup ecosystem, which I wanted to spend some time. We have more than 550 active e-mobility startups in India, and they have raised almost $850 million in the last 3 years. And investments worth $3.5 billion announced just between Jan and July of 2021. So we can clearly see that, innovation is really leading this industry. And you can see how the split is in the auto manufacturers, 63%, different areas of innovations as well. Service sector in the electric, about 8%, charging infrastructure startups, about 20%, battery solutions, 5%. And you can see how this breakup is really kind of changing the way the automobile industry is transitioning to electric mobility, and that we quite confident with these kind of numbers that, it's really finally picked up and it's moving in the direction that it was anticipated 2 to 3 years back. And this is the investment split. I'm not getting into the details. Of course, it's been led by one of the major OEMs, Ola and of Ather, but we see that, several startups, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, are really fostering innovation, and, new age entrepreneurship has clearly taken up in India in the last 3 to 5 years. And this is the growth of mobility startups per year. COVID clearly has had an impact, but we see that, last 3 years, in 2016 onwards, a trend where it's been a mix of several startups that have really started coming up, which we just spoke about in terms of, whether it's manufacturing or it's charging, it's battery. I think these are some of the innovations that we see. This is again a snapshot of, how two-wheeler manufacturing is happening. This is something that WRA India mapped up, and clearly we see, across dominantly in the northern, western, and southern portion of India, where, Delhi NCR and, different companies and different models. So, we always said that there were not so many products available in market, and now we see that, several products are being launched. And we have more than 15 to 20 startups, big companies, Hero Electric, we're talking about Ampere, Ola, Aether in the southern region, and some of the other ones, Bigos, and smaller startups that have really started coming up across India. This is also something I wanted to show that, how is the EV cluster coming up in India in the last different states that we have seen Karnataka, and how the tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers are also forming. So this is the cluster development in Karnataka around the Bangalore-Hosur region. This is in Maharashtra, where traditional automotive companies are moving into the EV manufacturing or supporting the EV OEMs. Again, these are all information that we have mapped based on data from our clients, and this is the maps that WR India has created. This is in Tamil Nadu, clearly in Chennai, and in near Trichy, Madurai, and Hosur, where we see a lot of the tier 1, tier 2. So it's not just about OEMs. We need to really understand that the whole supply chain, the innovation is getting established, and these are very clearly indicators. In terms of critical supply of minerals also, that there have been tie-ups that we have been seeing specifically around the lithium mines. And this is government initiatives like setting up Kabul to guarantee critical supply of minerals is on lithium and cobalt is clearly happening. And this is a snapshot. Quickly wanted to touch up, what have been cities doing in infrastructure. I think we have been supporting several cities, including Delhi, in Kerala, in Kochi, in Hyderabad. Cities have clearly started looking at charging infrastructure as a very serious initiative. This is a spatial analysis done in Hyderabad and Delhi. And we see that, clear identification, tender packages have come out. And I would really say that this is the right momentum, at least for the public charging. In private charging right now, there is this whole new thinking that we need to move away from public charging stations to charge point operators, charge points, and that clearly has come up. I think we need to continue emphasizing the innovation ecosystem, and as a way forward, invest in the knowledge economy and cyclic value chains, and also definitely value chain specialization in the context of the global markets is extremely important for India. Also, as a certain innovation, given the topic is innovation, how do we explore? We also need to start thinking that, so many depots and buses will get electrified across India over the next 4 to 5 years. And how do we use this as an opportunity to introduce even solar infrastructure in our depots? And this is something quite important for us to think through. And as we are fostering innovations, this is all well known, we need to include inclusive eligibility criteria, R&Ds, financing mechanisms, not touching so much. But this is what I also wanted to spend a few seconds over here, that, we will see that we will need to repurpose our strategies for, the existing infrastructure, whether it is bus stops, whether it is parking bays, or whether it is depots. And I think these are some preliminary number calculations that we have done, that, there could be a saving up to 0.1 billion in civil work costs for charging infra by repurposing depots and stops. Almost 1.6 billion in real estate costs may be saved due to this repurposing of the infrastructure. And this would result in improved public health and lower environmental damages. And of course, the ecological benefit can be only emphasized more. And this I've talked about in the need to solar power charging infrastructure, restructuring allocation of parking bays. And it's critical to optimize the spending that's going to happen at macro scale. This is my last slide, that while we are talking about electric mobility, we also seen that, hydrogen is being talked about. We know some states, Kerala specifically is also talking about piloting. There's been a pilot initiative to deploy 10 hydrogen fuel cell based buses. And even in the commercial long distance segment, it would really make sense. And from an environmental perspective, I think hydrogen as a cross-sectorial and specifically in mobility segment definitely needs to be explored and understood well. But to begin with, I feel that doing this kind of pilots, maybe even creating green corridors for freight, specifically like say Delhi, Mumbai, or Bangalore, or Chennai, is going to be very, very important. And we need to understand how would be the cost implications and what are the benefits. So that's an ongoing framework that WRI India has been working on the mobility sector. And yeah, with that, I would really, Opisa, end my presentation here. And any questions or anything towards the end, happy to take. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Pawan. I think an excellent layout of how things are evolving on electric mobility in India, obviously going at a much faster pace than what many thought. And I think also in many ways propelled by the innovation ecosystem that the country has encouraged. It hasn't chosen a design, decided to adopt it, and only look at that. It has allowed space for innovations, which is why you see so many new things coming up. So thanks for that, Pawan. Very nice layout, very good coverage, great presentation. Let me now move to Shreya. Shreya, I didn't intend you to be the last one. I was hoping you would come in before Jaideep, but since Jaideep is really in charge of organizing the whole UMI, I can quite understand the pressures on him. So that's why I had to allow him to come in earlier. But my apologies for that. I didn't intend you to be the last one. But Shreya, certainly, while last, not the least, we're hoping to look at a very different dimension from you. Over to you, Shreya.
Thank you very much. And there's certainly nothing to apologize. Had it been Mr. Jaideep, I'm sure you wouldn't have apologized to him for him being the last person either. And I think it's given that you've said that I will present a very different perspective on innovation, I hope I would not disappoint you in that front and provide a very contrasting view of what innovation can be like. So let me start. Let's see if you can see my screen right now.
Yes.
Great. So the topic of this conference this year, or the tagline for the conference this year, has been mobility for all. And what I'm going to speak about today is that it's possible to do mobility for all and innovation for mobility for all through innovative campaigns. But first, let me ask this question of what is innovation? And I think oftentimes when we hear the word innovation, we immediately think about technology. Technology seems to overtake any other idea of possible innovation. But it seems like it's either about vehicle technology or it's about information technology, and technology is the only way to innovate. But I'd like to contest that through my presentation and suggest that innovation is possible in many other ways. And one such way is innovative campaigns. And there are 3 campaigns specifically which the ministry itself launched last year and this year, which I will focus on and show how innovation has happened within these campaigns, what were called essentially challenges. So in 2020, when India was hit and the world was hit by COVID, it gave us an opportunity to rethink what mobility can be like. And India really kick-started a walking and cycling revolution led front and center by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, the Smart Cities Mission, through the Smart Cities Mission. The first of which was the India Cycles for Change Challenge, and the second was the Streets for People Challenge. Now, what was amazing about this was that over 100 cities really came together to reimagine what mobility could be like through not just these 2 challenges, but also a third challenge that was launched this year called the Transport for All. So focusing on all the 3 key elements that we require for a good mobility ecosystem in the country, right? Which is cycling, which is walking, and public transport. And we can't go wrong with this. And without these, we can certainly go wrong. And it's important that we get these right. And that's what these 3 challenges, or what I would like to call as campaigns, managed to achieve. What was different about these challenges or these campaigns was the idea of test, learn, and scale. Now, this is not unknown in the technology field because it's constantly a method that's adopted by startups across the whole world, the technology world, which is to test ideas, learn from them, evolve the designs, and then scale them up. But when it comes to projects in Indian cities, oftentimes everything is set in stone right up front, and which often creates problems. And therefore, could cities take a very innovative and a different approach, a new mantra, if you will, which is test ideas, experience the future before committing to it, learn from them, evolve the solution with critical input from all stakeholders, not just public agencies, but citizens especially, and evolve the design and then scale them up once we know what these interesting solutions are. The other, so, using this new mantra in all the challenges, but I'll speak more about the cycles for change because that's the most evolved of the three challenges. The path that cities took was this. The first of which was listen to citizens. Without us listening to citizens, we don't know what really can benefit the citizens. And therefore, the start was listening to citizens through perception surveys, through focus group discussions that gave cities a clear picture of the barriers to cycling, but also through walking and public transport, as in the case of the other two challenges that I spoke about. The second was essentially building a constituency, building momentum for walking, cycling, and public transport. And what was done here was through a variety of campaigns and events, both online and offline, where widespread support was built for the idea that we need to create cities for walking, cycling, and public transport. Not only citizens, but also key stakeholders, influencers within the cities, politicians, all of them were brought together to build the momentum. The third step was making cycling safe and fun and test out a variety of quick and inexpensive solutions to make streets safer and to make cycling easy, to make walking easy, to create public spaces and so on and so forth. And last, which is what the cities are going to do now, is scaling up for long-term impact through a variety of possibilities like policies, creating scale-up plans, institution building, which cities have already started taking steps towards under these challenges. Now, I'll show what cities have done through 10 snapshots and how in each of them you can see a color of innovation that cities did. The first one is, look at the idea of identifying the barriers by listening to cyclists. And a very interesting idea that the city of Rajkot did, which you can see in the inset, is that they interviewed postmen or postal workers to understand everyday cycling issues, because postal workers are one of those few people who continue to use cycles because that's the most appropriate means for doing postal deliveries. And hence they actually know very well the geography of the city and the barriers to cycling. And therefore, by asking them, it's much easier for the city to understand where the barriers are and how to fix them. Of course, that doesn't mean that they spoke only to the postal workers, but also to others. But postal workers was a very unique idea in bringing that in. Similarly, the second thing was to create a cycling community, because it's important that we need everybody to feel that this is theirs. Unless everybody comes together, a lot of people come together and you create a critical mass, it's very difficult for broader public support to be created in cities. And so a variety of things were done. Like, for example, in Kohima, the city set up 3 cycle repair clinics so that people could get their disused or not well-maintained cycles and they can start cycling in the city. It's a pretty neat idea, often which cities have not tried in the past. The third is making cycling safe and fun. Can you start putting, put these temporary bollards, pots and plants to create a segregation between what is for motor vehicles and what is for cycles, and test it out, see what works. How wide do you need a cycle track to be? Does it work or not? How many openings do you need for it? And so on and so forth. And it was pretty neat. And, for example, Delhi created a children's cycling plaza by rerouting car traffic and gave them an experience of what it would feel like if streets were car-free. And this was really welcomed by the local citizens, the neighborhoods. For empowering women to cycle, we know that women cyclists are much fewer in the country for a variety of reasons. Some, and most of them are social in nature because they do not have access to cycles, even if they know cycling. And two, the number of women who actually know cycling is much less than the number of men who know cycling because they just have not gotten access to cycles ever. And so cities across the country started initiating specific work towards getting women back onto cycles, doing special training sessions for women so that they could cycle confidently, going in groups so that they feel safer, and so on and so forth. Fifth, changing everyday behavior and lead, by having campaigns like Cycle to Work. Multiple cities, whether it's Jabalpur or Rajkot or Kohima, across the whole country, senior officials decided that at least one day a week is going to be Cycle to Work day. And even Ranchi, for example, had No Car Shanivar, which was a pretty neat idea, and it really succeeded. To lead from the front, show that the city means business. This is not some on the side event, one-off event, but something that it is doing again and again and again. And that's what really creates behavior change. The crowdsource ideas, for example, in Streets for People Challenge, there were close to about 1,900 designers. Cities created design competitions, and close to about 1,900 designers registered to help cities create designs for implementing them. So it's pretty neat that you can actually do this crowdsourcing. And it was done by multiple cities at one go. Like, over 40 cities actually ran design competitions simultaneously. Or things like walking audits and hosting public consultations on the designs which were created, activating spaces through different interventions across the whole country. This picture is from Gurgaon, but across the whole country, actually, cities did. And most recently, for the Azadi Ka Swarn Mahotsav, multiple cities across the whole country within 75 hours created transformed areas in their cities to give citizens a glimpse of what the future could be. And last but not the least, the idea that you could actually do a lot of innovation through low cost interventions and quick designs. You don't need to pour a lot of concrete, but you could actually do things very quickly. And so, what the impact of this has been so far in Cycles for Change, over 50 cities conducted a variety of events to build community support. They identified over 400 kilometers of main roads for transformation, and many of them are being transformed, but also identified lots of neighborhood streets where some quick interventions could be done to make them much safer for cycling, so that the entire neighborhood becomes safer. And a lot of localized streets could be done very quickly using cycles. A key element of this all the challenges has been the engagement of CSOs. Over 600 CSOs signed up to support cities, and they've been working hand in hand with cities to create these transformations. A lot of media coverage happened. A lot of citizen responses were gathered to inform what the city should do. And it also held the city responsible or accountable for what citizens were telling them. You could learn more about this from the link. I'll give the presentation later to the organizers so that you can actually have a look at this. And then the Streets for People Challenge, similarly, 42 cities rolled out design competitions. Over 1,900 designers signed up. 21 cities, and this number has increased since then, have piloted a variety of interventions within the cities, and CSOs coming up together, open street events which were conducted by cities. And last but not the least, especially in the Transport for All, nearly 100 cities, 97 of them have created these task forces, Transport for All task force, to institutionalize change. So I would call these proto-UMTAs. We've had a long history of wanting to have UMTAs, but we've not actually gotten our act together to have UMTAs. And for the first time, 97 cities actually have created something akin to an UMTA. All the key stakeholders on the table discussing what they need to do to make transport for all. So it's possible that through all of these, cities could be transformed, and they're already on the path for transformation. And how was this achieved? Through very simple means, but it was done at scale. So a series of workshops were organized for cities where they could come, participate, understand the process of how to engage citizens, how to do a variety of surveys on the ground, how to design and how to implement, how to test and learn, how to monitor and evaluate. And there was also a lot of peer-to-peer learning through these workshops. So cities learned from each other. They saw what other cities were doing, understood where they were succeeding, understood where they were actually missing the bus also to improve on. They also got access to a variety of guidelines. For example, this handlebar survey. It was a very interesting thing that cities really caught on to. And the idea was very simple: get onto your handlebars, like onto your cycles, and go out on cycle, and identified what the key pain points and the roadblocks were to cycling, and then give them design guidelines which they can use to implement these changes. And even simple templates. For example, can we give cities templates for press releases so that the city can go ahead and tell its media what it's planning to do? And so we gave them templates so that cities could customize a little bit wherever required, but they had the basic structure available for them through these templates. Or even social media campaigns, they had posters available which they could customize and start implementing. So the idea was remove the barrier as much as possible for cities to take action, even if it's a small action, but make sure that they do repeated action so that it becomes a new habit. And that's the key to behavior change. Reduce the barriers and make it a repeated process so that a new habit is created. And that's what cities did. And the way forward is to make walking and cycling safe and fun for everyone. Is a 5-step process. First is creating this policy and institutional change, which many cities have already started. 25 cities have moved from stage 1 to stage 2 of cycles for change. Similarly, streets for people also, many of these cities will now move to an advanced stage. They would be helped developing plans and budgets for how to scale activities. They would be given special assistance on building widespread support. Also helping them transform what was temporary but done was successful into a permanent infrastructure. And last but not the least, the important issue of parking, which oftentimes kills the idea of walking and cycling in Indian cities. So this is what cities are doing. They've even been given a template for a healthy streets policy with 10 pillars, and 40 cities are already in the process of adopting these healthy streets policies by doing consultations, customizing the template which was given to them, and making it their own. And so what cities did in the first stage was that they started to learn how to walk and cycle. They essentially started to learn how to pedal. In the second stage, cities will make walking and cycling everybody's mode of choice. And that's what these challenges, which is cycles for change, streets for people, and transport for all, are really doing, which is to transform cities through small but repeated actions to build off, do this through public support, and do this through testing, learning, and scaling. With that, I end. Thanks a lot. If you have any questions, please write to us at hello@urbanworks.in. But happy to take any questions right now too.
Thanks very much, Shreya. I'm glad you gave a very different dimension to innovations. I think it's not just about technology. You're absolutely right. There's much more to innovation. And the other thing that comes up, and very rightly said, is, a lot of these changes need changes in human behavior. Human behavior doesn't change just because you put some infrastructure in place. It needs nudging.
That's right.
It needs a greater confidence that, yes, we can make this change. It needs demonstration of what can be done. And I think these campaigns that you have sort of pioneered, and I think the ministry was very wise in sort of taking them on board and leading that, has led to these changes. So I'm glad that you brought in a dimension of not just technology, it's also human behavior, and how do you nudge human behavior in a certain direction. That's great. So thanks a lot for that. I think we have barely 7 minutes, and I just want to check if there are any questions from the audience. Unfortunately, in my chat box, I don't see any, but if there is anything, can someone tell me what the questions are, and then I can ask them? Okay. There are no questions so far received from the attendees, so I think let's leave that out. Let me just sort of, a couple of closing remarks for me. To me, the session was very fascinating. What we didn't expect was it will become so dominated by electric vehicles or electric this thing. So I'm glad that, both Sharath and Shreya brought in very perspectives from electric. So how technology has helped in using vehicles more intensively, more optimally. I think that is fascinating. A statement that I heard from somebody which has left a mark on me is, every empty seat in a moving vehicle is a wasted resource. So if the vehicle is moving, there is an empty seat. You've used up the road space, you've used up the energy, you've used up, you've caused the pollution, but that space has not been used. So this is where I'm a great fan of things like, the shared mobility options like the Uber Pool and the Ola shared vehicles, but some of that's not picking up. Is something that we need to think of. Why is that not picking up? What are the concerns? I know that cities like Cairo have come up with the Uber bus. Even in India, we have companies which have come up with, app-based shared buses. But we have constraints with our legal system, which still hasn't understood the role for them. The electric vehicles obviously is, as Pawan shared and as Mr. Balan shared, is picking up in a big way. That's a very positive sign. And finally, what Jaideep presented, there are people who would ask questions of what's the difference between this and a bus. I think Jaideep gave a good answer to that. He gave a good answer to that. But if one went to the next step, is what is the difference between this and a trolley bus? I think in ways his answers sort of reflected that as well. And what I would, frankly, from his presentation today, what I would take away is that this is India's innovation to mass transit. For whatever reason, there is excitement about the metro. Is this an innovation to India's form of mass transit? Then, of course, Shreya's presentation on really looking at active transport systems, particularly, I think, with the post-COVID situation, where people are traveling longer distances much less. Travel is more within a neighborhood. Yet we don't have systems that effectively cater to travel within the neighborhood. We had systems that cater to long distance travel, but not to systems within the neighborhood. And what can we do to make neighborhood commutes or neighborhood travel more eco-friendly, more active? I think that is really the way to go, the way I look at it. So with this, let me again thank all of you for these fascinating presentations, really enjoyable. I think IUT will take some steps to share those presentations on their websites. But thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Sir, we have 2 questions. We have just received 2 questions. If we have
now, you did not send it to me. And now, after I've said everything, you've got to bring it up. I've got a message on my thing saying there are no questions. Now you suddenly bring it up. What is all this?
Sir, we just received it. Actually, after 3 sessions we see it, but sir, we can close the session.
We'll have just about 5 minutes. So let me ask these questions, but my request will be, let's be very quick. So one is a question for Shreya. How and what were the topics selected for workshops that sensitize the city authorities? I don't know if you can make out what this means, but I'm reading it to you verbatim. And the other one, I think, is also, are there any studies about road space utilization proportionate to population by different categories of vehicles, non-motorized vehicles, and pedestrians? I think these are the 2 that I have. Shreya, can I request you to take 2 minutes and quickly respond to them? If there are any more questions, please say no more to that, okay?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Thanks a lot. So as a famous quote says, and I'm paraphrasing here, that planning is extremely useful, but plans are useless. Because once you've created a plan and you hit the road, you realize that a lot of what you thought was actually not true, or something has changed. And that's precisely the idea of test, learn, and scale. And so we had a lot of thinking about what we would do in each of these workshops. It was all, we said, okay, first workshop, we will do this. This is how cities are going to respond. And this is what we will do the second workshop, and so on and so forth. The minute we did the first workshop, we realized that our planning was great, but our plan was useless because cities were coming from a very different perspective. And we ourselves had to innovate. We had to test, learn, and scale, which meant that every workshop we went to the drawing board and said, what needs to change here? For example, initially we had a very step-by-step process of saying, we will do all of, first we will do community engagement, then we will do design guidelines, and then we'll eventually do implementation. But in reality, what we realized that we needed a certain component of community engagement at all the levels. It could not be just like, a step that was done initially, but was not done later on. And therefore, every workshop had a component of community engagement. Every workshop had a component of a technical side. So there was a technical angle, there was a community engagement and communication angle to every single workshop. That's how we went about it eventually, because that is what the cities required. We also asked cities, and one interesting thing that we did in this was that we actually created WhatsApp and Telegram groups where both cities as well as CSOs could be constantly sending what they're learning through the process. And these have been a fantastic hit because cities constantly posted what they did, what they tested. Some other city had a question as to how they did it. And then we connected them and said, okay, maybe you can check them in greater detail. So a big part of the challenge, which we had not initially envisaged, turned out to be this peer-to-peer learning exercise. We had thought of it as being an important component, but not as important as it turned out to be.
Shreya, the request is to speed it up a little more. I know
that's it. That's it.
But thanks,
so I think, maybe that's, and then the second question, there was also a second question on.
I don't think we'll have time for that,
sure.
So let's leave it out.
Sure.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you very much.